Hello, Merle, and welcome to Speaking of Everything. My guest in the program, well, is not a stranger. Who was here many years ago. Good to have him back again, Mr. Tadzio Bervoets. What do you say?
I'm
How
cool,
they-
man. I'm
Everything
good.
all right?
Everything is good. Good to be here. It's been a long time, but as always, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here and looking forward to our discussion. Before I start, I would like to give a happy birthday shout out to my mom, Cheryl Abega. It's her 70th birthday today, so happy birthday, Ma.
That's good. Happy birthday, man. It's amazing. She's an amazing lady. Very nice.
Thank you. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Man, it looks like you were living in New York. The
I
sun
know.
has seen you for
I know. I went from well, I guess it's a part of in the environmental field. As your career sort of advances, unfortunately, you spend less and less time in the field. So most of the light I get these days is from a computer screen. But I have some things coming up in January. Hopefully, it'll give me a little bit more sun. But yeah, it's crazy how I went from spending a lot of time out on the water, doing research, working in the marine park, and now I mostly work in policy in the region. So yeah, a tan is something that I definitely need to work at. Plus, I'm a brand new father of a 3-month-old. Thank you. So I mean that also limits the time that I get to spend outside. But I don't mind. I mean, a baby boy is a blessing. So it's been awesome.
It's nice. I like them when they're small like
yes.
that. After they reach 3, 4, 5, forget it.
Yeah. I mean, the only complaint is, well, it's not really complaint. It's part of the package. It's a little bit of a lack of sleep. There it can be early mornings or no sleep at all. But once there's a smile,
yeah,
you forget you forget about all of that.
Definitely,
and it makes sense now. So.
Right. So what have you been doing? You've been traveling, all over the place.
Well, actually, my travel schedule was very heavy up until about July or so. But because the baby was due in September, I told my various engagements that my travel schedule should remain non-existent until the 3-month mark.
Yeah.
So yeah. Last week I hit the 3-month mark, so I was in Colombia right away for a meeting with UNESCO. But yeah, things have been busy. Unfortunately, I don't work as much on St. Martin or in the Dutch Caribbean as I used to. I work more regionally, both within the Caribbean and Latin America. But I'm based for the most part in St. Martin, so here's where I do my, my quote-unquote 9 to 5. So I work from home. Mostly on developing policy for CARICOM, OECS, and then also for some of the Latin America countries that are out there. So it's been keeping me busy, but I do miss being out in the field. That's something that I do miss. But again, I'm still working in the environmental and conservation field, but now more in policy and in helping Caribbean countries develop sustainable financing, protected area plans, climate change mitigation plans, etc., etc. So it's an inevitable part of my career progression.
But you're highly respected environmentalist.
Thank you. Thank you.
And people who know you and work with you say the same thing.
Yeah.
And you started off in St. Martin, right?
Right. Well, I after I graduated with my master's degree from the Vrije Universiteit, so the Free University in Amsterdam, I went to Bermuda, where I was writing my thesis, and then they asked me to stick around for a little bit after I wrote my thesis to help them develop their coral reef management plans. After that, I lived in Africa for a year, where I worked on similar type of project, developing coral reef management plans, setting up marine protected areas. And then I was asked to move to Statia, actually, where I was marine park manager for a little over a year. And while I was in Statia, I was asked to come back to St. Martin and, set up, in those days, the Nature Foundation was inactive. So I came back first to put the Nature Foundation back on active status, ensure that we had government subsidy, and then, of course, establishing the marine park, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I consider Bermuda, my time in Bermuda, Africa, and and staged as a paid internship that prepared me for the work that I was able to do on St. Martin for the 9 years that I was the manager of the Nature Foundation.
I know I spent some time with you on different occasions, Lagoon, different areas and so forth. No, and it's amazing because I was saying to you earlier before we started, people see St. Martin, there's the waters around St. Martin, but they don't see what's below the water.
Right.
And I remember being on that boat with you in the lagoon, and I was amazed. You know, some areas shallow, some areas deep,
for sure.
wrecks all over the place.
Yeah, for sure.
Have it improved, you think?
I think it has improved. I think one of the most unfortunate events that we've experienced also led to some good opportunities in terms of projects that came around. So when we got hit by Hurricane Irma, it was a huge disaster, not only for our community and our infrastructure, et cetera, but also for nature. We had huge impact on our mangrove areas, on our seagrass beds. Of course, hundreds of yachts, sailboats sank in the Simpson Bay Lagoon. That also brought with it their environmental challenges from fuel leaking and battery acid, et cetera. So especially in the Simpson Bay Lagoon, I think that there have been some good improvements, especially through the coordination of the NRPB, the National Recovery Planning Bureau. I think the professionals that they had and have on their team in terms of environmental safeguards, environmental risk mitigation, et cetera, really did a good job, especially when it comes to the Simpson Bay Lagoon, the wreck removal. St. Martin now is also part of the European Union funded ReSembit project, which is a marine biodiversity and climate change risk adaptation project, which has also been a great asset for the country in terms of establishing what are still the needs, doing a gap assessment, et cetera. So there is, there are quite some positive movements, but the concern, of course, is it too little too late because of the decades and decades of really high environmental pressure that the island has experienced basically since the 60s.
Is it too late, you think?
I mean, especially being in the environmental field, you have to be a glass is half full kind of person, or else you will burn out and you will get disappointed in the work that you're doing. So I always have hope. In terms of St. Martin, the hope is based on some of the recent movements that have been happening on the environmental field. I would have noticed a commitment to protect Little Key in the lagoon. I would have noticed a letter of intent to protect the hillsides, letter of intent or the intent by the ministry to also increase some of the marine conservation measures that are happening. But I hope they can just move from the phase of being, move away from just being intentions, because what the road to hell is all paved in, is all paved in good intentions. And really that there has to be an urgency in terms of really taking some structural measures to ensure that our nature and our communities are protected. So really focusing on sustainable development. I mean, St. Martin is a small island developing state, and it's in the name. I mean, we have to develop as a small island. But, the trick is, how do we develop sustainably? Sustainably in terms of nature protection and conservation, sustainably in terms of having a sustainable economic model, and then, of course, sustainable in terms of our social services that we provide to our communities. So I really hope that while I can see that there's good movement in terms of the intentions that are out there, the structural decisions and actions needed to have happened yesterday. So I really hope that there's an understanding of the urgency to implement some of these actions that need to be implemented.
You're working with governments throughout the region.
Right.
Any work being done with St. Martin?
No, St. Martin is in a bit of an unfortunate situation. Well, not only St. Martin, but the Dutch Caribbean in general, and to a lesser extent, but it also plays a role, the French Caribbean, in that our relationship is closer with our European Kingdom partners and our fellow Caribbean parts of the kingdom than it is with the region. And that's something that I really have, not disappointed. I mean, that's the way our constitutional structure is. But it is something that St. Martin could greatly benefit from in having higher regional integration, especially when it comes to sort of climate change and conservation initiatives. I'm working now with the governments of the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada in setting up their blue economies. So, protecting their coastal resources, protecting their coral reefs, while at the same time supporting their fisheries sector, at the same time developing different economic opportunities such as sea moss cultivation, focusing on climate change, risk mitigation and adaptation and things like that. And these are initiatives which are made available to OECS or to CARICOM countries. And that's something that St. Martin and the rest of the Dutch Caribbean also misses out on because of our relationship with the European Union, our European Kingdom partners in the case of the Dutch side, and in the case of the French side with the French state. And because of that, we kind of lack the cooperation and collaboration that I noticed when I work with the OECS, for example. We've developed a very successful relationship through my engagement with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund in really using nature, so the goods and services that nature provides, to enhance the economies of OECS countries in particular, and the 5 countries that I mentioned. Developing out negotiation tactics when they got to go to the climate change meetings, and in terms of their engagement with UN bodies, et cetera, to really give them the tools to be able to although we're small in size, to really use the capacity and the local knowledge that we have about our islands to mean something on the global international stage when it comes to negotiations for climate change funds, conservation initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my disappointment in the phase, in my professional life that I am in now, that there seems to be less of an interest from the Dutch Caribbean in sort of focusing on that regional integration and participating in regional discussions when it comes to climate change and biodiversity conservation. But it's again, it's something that is increasing, and I'm also more and more trying to involve the Dutch Caribbean because of my background, both here at the Nature Foundation in St. Martin, but also as being the former director of DCNA, the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance. We're really trying to build a relationship between the Dutch Caribbean and the rest of the region, because we're all Caribbean people and we're regional. Sort of the regional impacts that are being felt by our neighbors in the region, we're facing those same impacts as well. Right. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We can lean on the expertise of our neighbors to come up with solutions for sure.
Maybe because some of them are independent countries, or they're part of CARICOM and so forth. For sure. I mean, that real, I think even before we came to have these discussions about climate change and cooperation in terms of biodiversity conservation, et cetera, I think especially the smaller islands saw what the benefit of coming together in a regional body would mean for the region. So yeah, I've been very impressed. Of course, I've done work with the rest of the Caribbean during my DCNA and Nature Foundation days, and some of the international panels that I sat on, et cetera, but really being focused on working in the wider Caribbean region has really opened my eyes as to some of the work that our neighbors are doing, and how we can benefit if we have a closer relationship with some of our neighbors in the region as well. But you need government involvement.
Yes, for sure, done, right? for sure. And I think more and more, especially with some of the projects which have been happening on St. Martin, I think more and more there's an awareness of the importance of cooperation and collaboration within the region. So I do see hope, yeah, for sure. As I mentioned, glass always half full. But again, in terms of our government, while I do see some very positive moves in the right direction, I hope that there is an awareness as to the urgency of some of the things that need to happen on St. Martin.
What would you say, in your professional opinion, are some of the urgent matters we need to address?
Well, there's a few. I think over the past 5 years or so, St. Martin again has gone through a period of rapid development.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that rapid development did not go hand in hand with basing the issuance of permits, et cetera, on sort of the considerations that have to be taken into account. And that is related to two major factors for me. One is the zoning plans need to be formalized and accepted by Parliament. I mean, this is something that has been worked on by the experts within the Vromi ministry, also based on some of the work that they've been doing with consultants, et cetera, for the past at least 6 or 7 years. And I really hope that the zoning plans can finally be agreed and put in place, because we need to have a plan in place that shows, which areas are fit for development in terms of residential development. Do we put the focus on building large-scale tourism-focused development, or do we, put focus on developing housing for our population? We need to know which areas that we set aside for tourism development as well, hopefully more in terms of sustainable tourism, and then which areas can be set aside for nature and conservation purposes. And then secondly, and something that I think the lack of having this in place has contributed greatly to sort of the unrestrained and unplanned development that St. Martin has been undergoing in the past 5 years, is laws related to making environmental impact assessments mandatory. St. Martin is one of the few countries in the region, whether Dutch Caribbean or not, that does not have mandatory environmental impact assessment laws. So what that basically means is, if there's a big development that is happening, you have to be able to, or it is the responsibility of that developer to contract an outside entity that develops an environmental impact assessment. So what will this development, what will the impacts be of this development in terms of the impact on nature, the impact on biodiversity? If it's close to the beach, will it have an impact on whether sand will remain on that beach, yes or no? But also, what will the impacts be in terms of energy demand, especially considering some of the issues that we've been going on, that have been going on with our utilities company? What will the impacts be in terms of traffic, et cetera, And without having that structure in place, permits will be issued based on, I think, monetary value or whatever have you, without looking at what the impacts of a certain development will have on the, on the nature and the society of the area in which it is being built. For example, some of the developments that are happening in Simpson Bay at the moment are having major impacts on the Simpson Bay community, having major impacts on the natural values of Simpson Bay Beach. So these things can be mitigated if there is a proper environmental impact assessment law in place. And then thirdly, I still think that we really urgently need to have a hillside conservation policy or hillside conservation law in place.
It's been discussed for many years.
Many years. I misspoke earlier. I said policy, but we really need to move away from policy. Both the hillside policy and the beach policy need to stop being policies, and they really need to be anchored in national legislation. So we need to have a hillside law that outlines, okay, there's no building. The hillside policy, basically, which we have now, can be turned into legislation and has to be strictly enforced, because some of the things that we've been seeing, some of the developments, especially that has been happening along the hillsides, has caused some soil destabilization. And we've had one of the wettest Novembers on record last month. We're in December now. And because of that, you've seen an increase in sort of flooding, mudslides, and, with some of the rain events that we've been having in November, people really lost quite a bit of their possessions because of flooding and mudslides entering their homes, et cetera. So we really need to come up with a sound policy in terms of protecting our hillside and protecting our beaches. And in terms of protecting our beaches, of course, I don't only mean, protect it for sea turtles that are coming to lay their nests, etc., etc. But we also need to have policy, a law in place that says, beaches will remain public to the people of St. Martin. The beaches will have to be accessible at all times, outline what that access will look like, etc., etc. So, I really hope that government, they're aware of these issues, and there's a new sort of focus on structurally, tackling these issues. But I do hope that they again realize how urgent it is and that it happens sooner rather than later.
Well, in case you've just joined us, I'm Earl Gibbs here, and speaking of everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio, my guest is Mr. Tadzio Bervoets. He's a well-respected environmentalist, consultant, and we're here to speak with him. When we come back, we're going to continue. Please stay with us. My guest is Mr. Tadzio Bervoets, a well-respected environmentalist, a consultant. He's traveling all over the region. So individuals come to you for advice?
Also.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I thought I'll do a little commercial here about the cake box. The cake box where you can get all your cake for the holidays or for whatever occasion. You want a coconut tart, a pie, a pudding, pineapple upside down cake, whatever it is, any kind of cake, tart, pudding, you name it, the cake box will make it for you. You can place your orders now. The telephone number to call the cake box is 521-2171. That's 581-2171. The cake box for all your cakes or any occasion right here in St. Martin. Just tell Genius OG sent you, all right? Yeah, so I was asking you about if private people can also contact you for.
Sure. I mean, I'm always open to having a discussion. People contacting me for advice, etc., etc. I'm always open, especially students. Working with young people has always been a passion of mine. I started in the, I was 28 years old when I started to manage the Nature Foundation. And sometimes I wish that I had someone to, kind of give me advice and steer me in the right direction. So I'm always available for especially young people, but also for private individuals who wish to have some advice. I usually try to respond. Of course, if I'm not traveling, and I might be a little bit slower in my response these days because of the baby, but I try as much as I can to be responsive. And the best way is to just reach out with me on social media, should anyone have a question. And I promise that I usually I'm quite responsive.
How they can reach out to you on social media?
Facebook or Instagram. Okay. Just look for me, Tadzio Bervoets, and send me a direct message, and I usually I'm quick to reply. With the understanding, of course, with a 3-month-old at home, and if I'm not traveling, which I'm not until at least January. So
that's good. When it comes to Great Bay Harbor and Manawasho is called,
right.
That's just outside Great Bay, right?
Yeah. So Manawasho, it's about 1.4 kilometers outside of Great Bay. And it's still the only sort of officially protected area that St. Martin has. In 2010, when it's almost 14 years now that the Manawa Shoal has been established. In 2010, we were quite eager to get it established, and during my discussions at that time with the Minister of TEAT, Honorable Franklin Myers, who was the TEAT Minister at that time, we decided that the marine park would be established through ministerial decree as part of the National Ordinance on Maritime Management. There's a specific section in that specific ordinance that calls for or that allows the minister the ability to set aside an area within our national waters as a protected area. And it was done through decree. Very many thanks to Minister Myers at that time and now MP Myers. But of course, the strongest piece of legislation that we can have is through a national ordinance. And I know that the Nature Foundation, together with some of her partners at this moment, are working on moving from having a national decree establishing the marine park to having a national ordinance. And that would also make me feel better as a former manager of the Nature Foundation, which has the responsibility of managing the Man O' War Shoal protected area. You know, a ministerial decree is at the whim of any minister that comes in office. So if there's a minister that does not understand the value of marine conservation, they can then roll back that decree, cancel it, and then all of a sudden we have no more marine park. So I'm looking forward to the time when the Nature Foundation, together with the VROMI Ministry, because I know they're working quite closely in realizing this, can have the marine park established through national ordinance.
Let me ask you this. You dive there a lot, right? For the person who's not familiar with it, right? Can you describe what it's like when you're diving at that park?
Sure. Well, I call, especially sort of, because within the Man O' War Shoal, there are various reef systems. So it's not as if it's one big coral reef within the area of the marine park. So there's patches of reef that are connected by seagrasses and rubble. But I always call it my it's where I go to worship. It's my church, because you have the coral reefs. It's not a very deep area. It goes down to maybe 70 feet at the deepest point. But you have these coral castles that are, they remind me of cathedrals, and it's really one of the most amazing spots that you can find in St. Martin. It can get rough in the marine park. Days like today, especially in December, January, with our Christmas winds, it can get a bit rough. But when on a nice calm day, it's one of the most amazing spots that you can. I mean, plentiful amount of fish, sharks, dolphins, turtles, coral, etc., etc. But of course, St. Martin, like the rest of the Caribbean, especially like the rest of Caribbean coral, we do have some challenges, especially related to climate change, in terms of coral dying off because our seawater is getting so hot because of a warming earth, etc., etc. But luckily, the Nature Foundation and the team there, do a great job in sort of tracking these outside impacts that are happening, etc., etc. But the marine park, looking back at my career, being able to establish an area, because I come from the dive industry. So I was first a diver. In between my undergrad and grad school, I was working in the dive industry as a dive guide on St. Martin. So while diving, I was able to see how the coral reef was changing, and that really motivated me to go study for my master's degree in environmental resource management, focusing on coral reefs. So being able to have contributed to my country in terms of protecting that specific area, especially now that I have a new son, really, it's one of my achievements, personal achievements in terms of my career, to have that area established as marine park. And I'm happy to see that the Nature Foundation continues to manage that area to a pretty high degree.
I know a few years ago a cruise ship hit it, and then they had to run that cruise ship onto the sandbank.
Yeah. A cruise ship hit it. I think,
that's quite a while.
Yeah, back. Quite a while ago. Yeah. I think 2005 or 2006 or something like that. And then again in 2011, a cargo ship hit it again. Right. MV Opal. Yeah, a cargo ship hit it again. And both incidents, of course, the cruise ship caused quite a bit more, but the cargo ship also caused quite some incidents. But through the negotiations that we had with both of those. With the parties involved in both of those incidents, the companies did give a settlement package to the Nature Foundation, so that the Nature Foundation was able to do some coral restoration, to restore the site after the impact has happened. So, and I think now, especially working, during my days, having a close relationship with the Maritime Affairs Department, and I know it continues now as well. Those incidents are a lot less common than they used to be, because now, since the marine park has also been there for about 14 years now, mariners are used to having to go around the park, etc., etc. So these incidents are a lot less than they used to be.
we used to see people with sharks going and feeding it. That's still happening?
No, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, especially not within the marine park, because there was an incident in 2014 where a dive operator who did not really know what they were doing was doing a shark feed, and one of his employees got bitten. And then, of course, after what happened in Orient Beach in December 2020, where a swimmer unfortunately lost her life due to a shark attack, we really discourage sort of this shark feeding behavior, unless you're properly trained. And properly trained really means you have to go to an organization outside of St. Martin to get training in how to really deal with these animals. But at the same time, we're still doing, it's something that I'm still involved with, still quite involved in doing our shark conservation research, because in terms of if you have a species that is healthy, especially an apex level predator like a shark, it shows you that the rest of your waters are doing okay as well in terms of health, etc., etc. So, it's still something that we're heavily involved in. I'm also involved with Discovery Channel in terms of developing a Shark Week episode on St. Martin and Saba. So stay tuned for that. And It's that's one of the things that I'm still quite heavily involved with, and one of the only things that get me back out on the water these days is the shark research.
I always used to tell you, I envy you for that job, man.
Yeah,
I love nature.
Yeah, going back, looking back, of course it was tough. There were times when I had a dive I patrol the marine park in the morning. Then I had a dive to do some maintenance or to do some research. Then I had to go to the office, quick shower, put on a suit, meet with Parliament, then back for a board meeting. So it was 9 years of very heavy work. But when I look back now that I'm an office guy, so to speak, I was like, man, you had the best job in the world.
Let me ask you about the iguanas.
Sure.
How familiar are you with that problem in St. Martin?
Yeah, too familiar. St. Martin has, not only iguanas, but monkeys too. There's some discussions whether raccoons were native, yes or no.
They have raccoons here?
Yeah, especially on the front side, especially in the area surrounding Anse Marcel.
Yeah.
There's a pretty healthy raccoon population. People still send me pictures to ask me what type of cats are these. I was like, those are not cats, my friend. But African land snails. So St. Martin has an issue in terms of invasive species. The native iguanas that we had while I was growing up, 30 to 40 years ago, we no longer have, because the common iguana that you see now everywhere was introduced into St. Martin and became the dominant species. So it outcompeted the local iguana that we had, the lesser Antillean iguana, and they're now extinct. Same thing with monkeys. Monkeys have been introduced here. Monkeys don't only eat fruits, but they also eat eggs. So we've seen also a drop in the bird population on St. Martin because of the monkeys eating the eggs. Same with the African land snail. People are really starting to focus on bringing back agriculture, which I think is critically important. But in order for it to be successful, we do have to address some of the issues that we have in terms of our invasive species. And unfortunately, I know I'm going to be crucified by some of my colleagues in the animal welfare space. But the only way to control the population of invasive species, unfortunately, it's scientifically established, and it has been done in many places around the world, is to control their population. And the only reasonably cost-effective way to control their population is to move towards a population control through the removal of that animal. And that will involve putting down the animal. Of course, it has to be done in the most humane way possible, but we have to safeguard our native and endemic species. And with the invasive species that we've been having, also with people trying to have agriculture reinvigorated on the island, we have to address some of these issues first. Because people message me all the time. I've managed to finally have my papayas or my avocados come through, and then a monkey comes and takes one bite out of them, throws them on the ground, and that's it. Same with the iguanas. People are trying to have, kale and spinach, etc., growing in their gardens, but then overnight they can be completely destroyed by one or two iguanas that come through. So there has to be more effort put on managing invasive species on the island for sure.
Well, I'm happy to have you here after a long time.
My pleasure, as always.
And it's good. Again, congratulations on your newborn son and your mother making birthday.
I know. It's a big week for us.
Anything else you want to add in closing?
No, I just want to, again, as always, to remind citizens of our amazing country that we are not separate from nature. St. Martin's nature is what makes St. Martin, and to recognize that and to cherish that and taking that into account to, do our effort in terms of protecting nature on our island. And then, as always, I mentioned it before, if you have any questions or concerns or you want to discuss things that have to do with nature and the environment, my door is always open for sure.
All right. So, again, thanks. Much success.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And that's it for now on Speaking About Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. See you next time. Take care. Bye.